Everyone, and welcome to the Amplitude of Tech podcast. I'm Shawn, Chief Marketing Officer of Amplix. This is the Inside Amplix edition of the podcast. What does that mean? We're going to bring you thought leadership from Amplix employees, actionable intel and insights that we've learned by doing thousands and thousands of technology transformation projects. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Mike Dolloff, welcome to the Amplitude of Tech podcast. This is the Inside Amplix edition, and you are one of the key people inside Amplix, so I'm happy to have you here. Maybe just tell people a little bit about who you are, what you do here.
Yeah, glad to be on. I've been waiting for this day for feels like 10 years. So honored to be on. Surprised it only took $100 bribe to get here.
I didn't get that yet, by the way. I'll send you my Venmo afterwards.
No problem. I'm sure it's on the way. Yeah, so Mike Dolloff, I'm EVP of Sales and Account Management. I've been with the company for over 12 years now and came as much of Amplix did through strategic acquisition. And I worked to build out a CX-focused technology advisory and services company. And so love the contact center and CX space, been in that industry for a while, but now have a broader view, help our clients with not just that, but a lot of other areas. And that's about it on me.
All right. Having been in this space for that long, you've seen quite a bit of change in the landscape of the industry and, of course, the technology of the industry. And so it's been, a few years since AI has become the buzzword, and it's been practically available for enterprises to implement in a way that actually can impact their business. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, where are we at in terms of adoption across enterprises that have contact centers?
Yeah, I think if you think of the innovation adoption curve, where you've got kind of this bell curve shape and where people are at, I think we're getting close to the top of that, where you've got kind of the early majority is kind of reaching peak saturation, and then we're going to start getting towards the late majority here in the next couple probably months to year. So we're right in the thick of it right now. And what that practically means, I think, is there's still a good, probably close to 50% of the market that's not doing much with AI in the contact center yet. Which might sound surprising because you see so much, and this has been the news, and you go to an event and you search anything on this, and it's everywhere. It's the amount of volume of this noise around this is so loud, but practically speaking, you will still see probably roughly 50% of the contact centers that aren't doing anything yet. Now, when I say that, researching, yes, evaluating things, thinking of strategy, maybe they're working on internal governance and guardrails. Yes, I'm sure more than 50% of that have that stuff going, but actually using AI in the contact center, I think it's still around 50% or less. Now, some are very fully there, and some are dabbling in proof of concept or have one or two use cases built out. But that's kind of where we're at. I still think there's a lot of runway. So if you're like, man, I haven't done anything yet, you're not the last person. And I've been saying that for a couple of years. At some point, though, I'll be like, you are the last person. But we're not there yet.
It's coming.
Yep.
So you said fully there. That was the words that you used about businesses that are really engaged in the adoption of AI in the contact center. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's just a handful of folks there, but I think it's I like to think of the contact center when it comes to AI in two big buckets. You've got, where is it directly interfacing and impacting the end customers, and then where is it impacting the business internally? And a customer that's fully there is leveraging, as it makes sense to the business, in both of those buckets pretty comprehensively. And we can dig deeper into that. But at a high level, that's what it is, right? You're doing something where you're leveraging AI for your in-facing customer interactions, right? Whether that's a really intelligent chat or SMS experience, really intelligent kind of voice virtual agent experience, some combination thereof. And then on the internal side, meaning the business side, it's you're leveraging AI to really make smarter, more informed, more capable agents, right? Whether that's better QA and automation around that. So you're measuring more comprehensively. You're helping agents have knowledge at their fingertips without having to search for it. You're streamlining that process. So when they're on an interaction, they're focused on the human component, understanding and empathy and solving a complex problem versus, oh, where's that document? And let me ping a colleague, like having that surfaced up, things like that. So being mature in adopting across all these different areas, which are all part of the contact center, but historically, right? Like you've had, a lot of contact centers siloed this stuff, right? Oh, the IVR stuff, that's this team, that's this person, the QA, that's this team. So this kind of crosses a lot of the functional teams that are responsible for the contact center operations in tech.
When I think about AI in the contact center, now, mind you, I'm not out there selling this, right? I'm not engaging with clients at that level. What is most visible to me is the front end stuff, right?
Yeah.
So chat bots and voice AI bots, and do we call them bots anymore? Agents, I guess. I'm using
Yeah.
old terminology
No
here.
one's standardized. Yeah. Virtual agents, I guess, is more of the common term now. Yeah.
Uh, I'm increasingly becoming the cranky old man yelling at kids to get off his lawn, and
You and
it's
me both.
not keeping up with the vernacular, but so that's what I think of, right? Is that front end facing, customer facing experience type of stuff. And when we had our prep call before this, you said that actually you think there might be more adoption on the back end stuff. So just kind of talk to me about what is the entry point for most businesses? Is it the front end stuff and they quickly grow to the back, or is it back and then they start to grow to the front?
Yeah. I think when you think about the horror stories you've heard about AI when it comes to the contact center, most of those have been like the chat bot that gave away a car at a dealership for $5, or
Right.
somebody had to do a ticket exchange with one of the airline carriers because of a death, and it was just a very inhumane sort of treatment of how it was dealt with. Those are the ones that pop in people's heads because the press. So I think there's created a little bit more fear broadly in the market because of that on the customer side, somewhat. Now, there's still lots of people who are like full steam ahead, but I think that created a little bit initially of like concern and fear around that. I think we've largely gotten past that. People aren't. We're not seeing that. I mean, done well, like that's not a problem at all. But there's a little bit of kind of reticence of, well, I don't want to screw up a customer interaction. I get it, right? Like that's your brand. That's the front door to your business in a lot of cases, and people are really concerned. That being said, there is a lot of adoption there. But yeah, I think on the back end side of it, you've got AI being used. It's not as immediately visible to us as a consumer, but on the contact center, it's, yeah, there's agent assist that's happening. There's knowledge, AI driven knowledge that's happening. There's interaction summarization in QA that's happening. And I think a lot of that is because it's not facing the public. And so people felt like this is a little more contained. This is an internal workflow versus if this isn't set up or just done right, I'm going to impact customers directly. And I think that's one thing. The other thing is these are existing processes that you're able to leverage AI to augment very quickly. You think outside of like the contact center, just broadly, we're doing things as individuals or in the business where we're using tools like Copilot and Claude and others to now augment a process that we've been doing manually. It's the same concept here in the contact center with you. So I think people gravitate versus like, hey, I'm going to build an entire customer interaction and journey and use generative AI or agentic AI to do that on the front end. That feels more daunting. It is, frankly, than like, hey, I'm going to leverage generative AI to summarize my interaction I just had as an agent, so my notes are really concise and I can say yes or no, this is right. So I think there's a level of effort, there's a level of perceived risk difference between them. I also think too, some of it is there's this big debate going on out there of like, is AI enabled CX the future where humans aren't needed, or is this to augment and improve humans? And I think this is a broader societal discussion, but my feeling is people feel very comfortable of how do I leverage to make these agents more effective, and that quells some of the noise too of like, are my contact center agents going to go away? Like, hey, I'm going to help you get better and smarter. I'm going to help you get more of the interactions and handle those more efficiently, or take off some of the interactions that are maybe frustrating or repetitive, so you can focus on these important ones. I think that's where I think a lot of companies are trying to get to too, and like, let's enable the team to have a more, I hate to say it, but like enjoyable job to some extent, because it's tough being in the contact center, just getting
Sure.
pounded with issues all day long.
Yeah. I think everyone that I've spoken to on this podcast, at our events, doing stakeholder interviews for projects. When I'm dealing with a technology leader and I ask them about AI, whether it's in the contact center or not, they all have the view that this is an enabler and it might be something that reduces future costs of staffing up so
Hmm.
that they don't have to scale human resources linearly with increased, you know, volume or whatever growth they're seeing in their contact center or their business. But nobody is saying I'm hoping to get rid of everybody. And you do see some of these horror stories, like Klarna, I think, was someone that overnight
Yep.
fired like what 700 agents and then had to hire them all back. Right? That's a kind of an ill-conceived move, I think. But that's the outlier. But
Right.
you do see a healthy dose of skepticism in society right now towards AI, and skepticism might be a nice way of putting it. I mean, people are really concerned about what AI is going to do to jobs. They're really concerned about data centers and the impact to their communities and to natural resources. And so I do wonder if that's something that is ultimately going to. I don't think it's going to limit growth. Maybe you'll feel differently, but do you think it would slow adoption where businesses that may have introduced AI into the front end a little bit might be sitting on the sideline a little bit longer because consumers might not be too into the AI thing right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Yeah, skepticism. I would say cynicism right now, right? Like that, we're in this deep wave of it right now. I honestly don't think so because if you look at the reasons why AI in the contact, why AI especially landed earlier, I think broadly in the contact center than other spots, is because you have this storm that's been brewing for a while, which is customers are demanding better service, and companies need to maintain costs, right? Like it's a competitive market, there's macro headwinds, just whatever, right? Like there's been staffing difficulties in here, right? Like these labor challenges have persisted. And so I think there's already this challenge that that companies and organizations have to solve for. And I think I fundamentally believe this, that at the end of the day, if I'm a consumer or anybody that's engaging in the contact center, I'm trying to get a problem solved in the most effective way possible. And sometimes that might be getting me quickly to a human that can solve that problem because it's just a weird thing and there's not, it's just a one-off kind of situation. But also so I think people want choice, or people want efficiency in getting a problem solved, and they want choice, right? So as long as you build those into your strategy, then I think you're okay. This was where it comes into like escalation by design and the thoughtfulness of this, where if you're jamming people into, this is where people are frustrated with IVR still, you're jamming them into this path that's going to waste a bunch of time for them because they ultimately need to talk to somebody. If it's doing that with AI, it's going to probably cost you more as a business and you're going to frustrate your end customer. It's just the same as an IVR in that way. So I don't think it slows it down. I just think it will force the issue if companies are doing this incorrectly or not thoughtfully. Then people will use, I hate that they're doing this at the AI. What they're really mean is it's not solving for my need for efficiency and solving a problem I have or the way I want to do it.
Yeah. You just kind of hinted at something. Are you finding that when people are adding AI into the customer experience journey, that they're being thoughtful about the underlying processes that they're adding AI to? Or are you finding that people are adding good AI to bad processes, which makes bad processes terrible processes?
And more expensive ones. Yeah. It's a little bit of both, right? There's a mix here. And this is where when you talk about ones that don't go well or, you know, the board's mad because this AI project's failed, what happened, what went wrong, it is often this, right? It, people want it to be this easy button to solve everything. But you're right. Like we've built in the contact center a lot of these processes based on limitations of technology or it's just this is the way we've done it for 10 years or 20 years. And we worked with contact centers that literally they've been around for 100 years, the business and the model. You might not have called it a contact center the whole time, right? But they've been operating with this customer service or support element in it. And the process hasn't evolved since they were doing this stuff with like pen and paper. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, this is a needed time to really look at it's really the unsexy, unheralded part of this, but it's really important because what are we trying to actually accomplish? Why are we doing it this way? Now, that starts pulling these threads that maybe widen the scope of what needs to be addressed and maybe slow down, but you need to slow down to kind of really get the full benefit. Because you're right. Otherwise, you'll end up with failure, or we're spending a lot more money than we thought we were. Because, and this is the challenge that I think as this matures with AI broadly in the enterprise, like you're starting to see people pull back because like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, even internally, right? Like we're using AI tools and we have to look like thoughtfully before we roll this out. Like, how are we using this, and what are the workflows, and have some standardization. Otherwise, you just unleash this, and all of a sudden, the CFO's knocking on everyone's door, like, "What are you doing? Oh, where did this cost come from?" Same thing in the contact center. So yeah, it's a needed thing. It's something I think people will speed past, and we've had engagements recently with clients where they're getting pressure from senior leadership, like you got to do this project, and we're coming in as the advisor saying, we agree it's a great project, but here's the order of operations. Like you have to fix these things first. Otherwise, and they're like, no, 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 we just want the software. We want it working. And we're like, I hate to be the naysayer here, but you're not going to get what you need if you skip this stuff. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for companies to realize that sometimes when they want the easy button, but there is no easy button here. You're going to have to do it. But that being said, I think I think this is one of the best things that can happen for companies is to be really introspective on processes. It's one of these things that gets neglected way too often, and use this AI moment, this AI tailwind to really drive some of that change, because you'll find probably a ton of your processes outdated, unnecessary, complex, unfriendly to customers, unfriendly to internal people. And while you look at this AI strategy, you unpack that, you're going to have a very good sustainable AI adoption strategy then.
It's probably an interesting message to the 50% that haven't, stepped into this AI movement yet. And that is, take this time while you're sitting on the sideline. Don't sit on your hands. Start addressing some of the underlying processes in the business so that you are ready. But yeah, I think this probably becomes more acute of an issue when you introduce agentic AI into the picture. And my impression has been that contact center was one of the first areas the enterprise saw value with AI. And I think it was also because it became productized here and you were able to
Mhm.
buy versus build a lot sooner than some of the other use cases for AI. So, I wonder, how do you view the buy versus build conversation now, and how does agentic potentially change that?
Yeah, I think your point on agentic first too, of just the process. That's a great point, because you're, again, think of cost, right? With agentic, and I'm now doing these steps, right? And I'm building these things out. If that's clunky, if it's clunky in the past, as businesses, for whatever reason, we've gotten used to the idea that we're going to just waste money on having people do inefficient processes. That's just sort of like the course of, like, business are okay with that. Like that happens everywhere. But people are less okay with that, with AI doing that for you. Why are we spending money on these AI, which are expensive,
Yeah.
right, to do these inefficient processes? So you're going to have to solve that for agentic, right? For sure. The build versus buy. So I think there's a couple things. I think in the contact center, you're right. It's been very productized. We have seen, and this is broader with, I would say, kind of broad contact center technology. It's mostly been a buy marketplace, with some exceptions on the enterprise fringe, I would say. But the majority of contact centers, the majority of where agents live and where contact centers live, is not it. They're not building most of this stuff. That's still edge. I just think that's definitely the case still with these AI enabled CX products. I think there's a lot of, why build that application when that's a tool being used for, that's not the core purpose of the business, right? In most cases. And I think there's been a lot more, I think, awareness and understanding too of, people typically want to build when there's a control element, or they just have a lot of resources, and that's sort of like the DNA of the company. I think the control element of like data and LLMs and all that, people have, I think the general enterprise levels awareness of what that all means and being educated on that has risen up. And then the tools, right, the built products have a lot more kind of capabilities for customers to understand and get comfortable that, hey, if I'm buying this, this is what that means for my controls, for my data. This is what my data is doing for myself or for others. And people understand that, so they're comfortable. So I don't see that changing, honestly. What I do see changing, and this kind of ties in the agentic, is I think there's just, how do all these things play together well, right? Because you are going to have environments where you, even in the contact center, might have several different products. running different things that talk to each other, integrate with each other, maybe use different LLMs in some cases or share LLMs in some cases, then tie into stuff that maybe does workflow automation across the whole enterprise that doesn't necessarily sit in contact center because it touches other parts of the business. I think there's a lot more of that as this matures that will happen. And I think that won't open up necessarily build, but it'll open up the contact center becoming more integrated, communicating from an API and technical standpoint more with the rest of the enterprise real time. Whereas historically, it's mostly been in its own little piece. And this is now like opening up, like, where does some of this data flow? Like, and this sort of ties in, I think, maybe with like some of the CRM and this other broader conversation, like the customer journey and customer data. But I think these doors start opening up, and contact center moves from being a silo to much more of an integrated part of the business.
So interesting. Your rationalization for buy versus build makes total sense, right? Why recreate something? Why spend the time and resources, have the risk of potentially failing or not doing it well when you can buy something off the shelf that's already enterprise grade and people are using it and probably quicker to deploy? And I think that's sound logic, and I'm not saying that it's not, but I do think something is changing in that I read 3 articles just yesterday on avoiding vendor lock-in in AI,
Uh-huh.
right? And a lot of that has to do more with the inference models that are kind of sitting on the back end of AI workflows that people are building. But there is a real concern about the underlying cost structure of AI and token use optimization being something that is a super critical conversation to have internally now, because if you do get locked in with a vendor and they do change the underlying price
Yep.
structure, then the economics of your solution could get turned completely upside down, and then it's no longer a viable solution, right? So I do wonder if we're going to come to an inflection point where people have to think a little bit more seriously about the build instead of the buy, to avoid being stuck with a vendor for a period of time and having that kind of that model flip on them.
No, I think that is risk. And I think that's a concern. I don't know exactly what that looks like, honestly, but I think you're right that they're starting to pop up some of these stories where someone that, a large technology provider that people have invested a lot into suddenly is like, hey, and some of it maybe is just greed, margin expansion. Some of it is potentially underlying costs are expanding rapidly for them as well, right? In this new world uh, of all the costs associated down to the we're starting to get visibility in the broader public of like the costs of data centers and the environmental costs and the social costs and the hard costs, electricity. And people have been wondering for the last 10 years why their utility rates are going up. I think they're starting to realize why. Like those are no longer hidden. So you're starting to see this. I think that's a real concern for sure of, hey, I've put a lot of eggs into this particular basket. It's become really important to have this part of the tech stack. We've re-engineered our workflows and all the stuff around it. And all of this, and we built this all with an assumption of cost at X, and now cost is X plus 30%. Like, how do we justify that? So I think there's this, I don't think that's necessarily new, but it's new in the AI world that we're starting to see this. And I think that's the risk that businesses were going to have to kind of manage of like this off the shelf ease, enterprise grade security controls, but there's risk of having too much in too few of providers where I'm now at the mercy of cost increases. So yeah, I think there's a balance. And then are there certain elements of this that we should bring in house or we can build, or middleware or connectors that we can easily then swap this piece, this provider with someone else similar if we need to, because we've engineered our enterprise to be able to kind of move pieces and parts out. I think there's some level of framework that enterprises will be seeing and figuring out over the next couple of years to mitigate that risk for sure.
Yeah. I, this reminds me just a little bit of how telecom has evolved over the years. I mean, if you go back to deregulation and the Telecommunications Act of 1996, you saw that people had to get access to infrastructure, like third parties, competitors needed access to infrastructure because the cost of building the infrastructure was huge, and there was regulation that limited the underlying RBox, the carriers, from how much they were able to charge on those platforms. And so you got a world where you had competitive pricing and it drove prices down over time. And now you're seeing in that same space with POTS lines that the FCC has let up on some of those pricing regulations on that infrastructure. Costs are skyrocketing
Yeah.
overnight. And so you didn't, it takes regulation potentially to keep prices down and in check. And when you lose that regulation, you see that the prices, start to go up. So we're in an unregulated, wild, wild west kind of
Yeah.
environment with AI right now. And there's no question that these companies are losing boatloads of money, like boatloads of money. So it's going to be a real challenge for people to navigate this uncertainty in terms of costs going forward. I'll step off my soapbox now and ask the last question, but I was curious, what are your thoughts on, the CRM market is really starting to embrace AI, obviously, and it has been leaning into the CX space for some time. In fact, I'm surprised that you don't see more competition, from the CRM stepping into CX technology. But CRM is critical for the contact center tech stack, and I'm just curious if you're seeing or think that you're going to see the CRM market start to shape the AI in CX space at all.
I think we're starting to see it already. It's always been this co-opetition, frenemy kind of, for the last couple, I shouldn't say always, it has been the last couple of years, right? Because you have Salesforce and ServiceNow and Zendesk and others. And they're, I'd say, in varying degrees of where they're at too. I think Zendesk is more aggressively, as an example, pursuing this. ServiceNow is a little less aggressively pursuing it. Salesforce is pretty aggressive, but not quite as aggressive as Zendesk is, as a simple example of three of the bigger ones in this space. So they continue to evolve their relationships where they're going to play nicely together and improve integrations and do these kinds of things. But I think the signal's pretty strong that I think the CRM and ITSM space is trying to own more and more of the customer interaction side of things versus just the customer record, customer data side of things. And that kind of goes back to your point earlier, right? Which is, for some customers, they're like, great, that's great. We have a lot of invested here. Let's invest more. And I think the risk there, right? There's a couple of risks. One of them is the fundamental economic risk of being all in on certain things. You're now putting all your eggs in a basket of a tech company that if they change pricing, what's your leverage? You don't have much. You have zero leverage if you're all in on that. That's one thing. I think the other thing is, fundamentally, contact center has been a complex. There's been a lot of people who've tried to pivot into it and not done well, or it's not gone as quickly. I'm not in on the Salesforce side of things, but I would think if you were able to get the truth for some of their executives running it, it's probably not been as easy of a pivot into trying to drive as much of that as they thought it would be. It's really tough. Telephony is tough. Voice is tough, and interaction and all the things that need to happen in a contact center is tough. We see this every time somebody enters the market and they're like the newest thing, the new CCaaS provider, for example. It takes them a while to get some of the stuff that people consider table stakes.
Mhm.
You know, it just, because there's just a lot of depth in these products and the use cases and scenarios that have to be. So I think these worlds continue to converge. I still think you have a lot of enterprises who are very comfortable and want to keep them as separate but very tightly integrated solutions. And I think what you see down market is more people saying, "Hey, I would like to simplify the tech stack and consolidate where I can, and here's an area to do that." I think you'll see more of that, but it's early. I'd say it's early innings of that. Like, there's a long ways to go. And then if you take the other side of the coin, there's people who are like, "Look, with generative and agentic AI, the state of like CRM is what do we need CRM for? Like, this is just about data and workflows around making it streamlined." So there's another world or another kind of argument that's like, contact centers needed customer interaction stuff is getting more complex and more sophisticated, but CRM is becoming more of an easy commoditized thing with some of the AI enhancements. So I don't know where it goes, but I would say they're converging very strongly, but there's some really interesting inflection points ahead of us still that we don't know where it'll go. But those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly why, because it's it can be commoditized. That's exactly why I feel like they're going to see value in leaning into AI. And
Yep.
I can see Salesforce doing agent assist. Why wouldn't they? Right.
Mhm.
Or I could see them, doing sentiment analysis. Why wouldn't they? And I could even see them doing data services, like helping businesses get their data prepared for AI. And that doesn't have to just be CRM records, right? But at some point, SaaS companies are going to have to look at their model a little bit more closely, I think, because what you are going to eventually have is AI interfaces that people talk to get their data, and not necessarily, portals and dashboards that come with your software
Yep.
applications. Create your own portals, create your own dashboards, use natural language to ask the questions on the data that you're looking to glean the insights. So anyway, Mike, practical takeaways before we go. Like, someone listening to this, maybe they're in the lagging 50%, maybe they're in the leading
Yeah.
50%. I don't know. What do you tell them?
I still think there's very few businesses that have exhausted all of the, call it, low hanging fruit opportunities of AI in the contact center. So there are some for companies that haven't started anywhere. There's stuff on the front end, the client side of AI, the in client side of, you know, there's so many repetitive things that happen in the contact center, right? Checking shipping status, appointment status, authenticating, right? It's not even the whole journey, right? There could just be pieces of this journey that could be automated and leverage AI for. If it's internal, it's what are you doing for agent assist stuff? What are we doing for auto summarization of interactions, for auto dispositioning of what this interaction was for? QA is a process that people even like internally, right? I'll point us on this. Like we have contact centers, and it's like we're still like, I'm pushing our team, like, let's do more of this auto QA stuff and do more interaction analytics, because there's so much rich data there. So I think there is low hanging fruit, I would say, in like 90% of the market right now with AI. It's where is that? And so it's hard to say start here always or start there, because it just depends on, it really depends on the type of business and where what their workflow is like. There's a lot of customers that are like they don't have automation on the client side, because it's it's a very unique kind of model, and what they're helping clients with is very different, and or it's B2B or something. That's fine, but what are we doing internally then, or vice versa? So it really depends. But I think if you there's areas to prioritize. I think that's the big word I'd say, is prioritize. Don't try to do all of this at once. What are the areas that, based on our business, based on what's going on, we have, whether that's internal facing or external facing, to find, and then start small, right? Like identify that thing and prove that out, and then go from, like, show a win for internal people, right? Executives, internal folks, for agents, for your customers. Like, find a win and show a win, and then build from there. And I think that's the big other thing practically is, unlike other big transformations where it's like, oh, we're going to go from like prem to cloud in our contact center, or we're going to go from like single channel voice to like multi-channel or omni-channel. This journey of AI adoption is, there's no real destination at the end of it. It is truly a journey that no one can see where the end is right now. So you have to adopt this mindset and sort of stamina to be in this for the long haul. So just don't assume like you're going to check this box and be like, we're done and we never have to touch this again. There's a lot of evolving just on a particular use case, let alone that's one use case of dozens of other things we can do in the business. This is a long journey. So just have that kind of marathon mentality of how you're going to approach it, with leadership, with expectations, with everyone.
All right. So if someone is ready to start their marathon, they're ready to start small, but they don't know which project to start with. And if they're looking to get a quick win and they want to get some support from Amplix, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, reach out to me, reach out to someone in the sales organ. I mean, this is where we add a lot of value, because we know we can quickly come in and assess and say, let's start here versus there. Here's why, and save, because you might get a win, but that win might take you a year, versus we could get a win in 3 months, and that makes a big difference in getting budget approval and getting excitement and momentum, and in realizing ROI. So yeah, get in touch with me, mdolloff@amplix.com, and I'll route you to the right person on our team who can help.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your time and expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Shawn.